promised that I would make you a video of the sheet that we did in class. And so this is our video for that sheet to kind of help us get our projects done for Tuesday. February 28th is the due date. This is the sheet that we made in class here. We have some graphs and we have some tables. I made the tables shorter than we needed to. But remember that we need to have a short-term and a long-term goal in our table. I'm going to make a new sheet and we'll just go through this and how I made the tables. So we had a short-term goal. We chose car for that, but it really doesn't matter. But you would type in what your short-term goal is, okay? And then we'll just go over a ways and we will put in long-term goal. You can label that as much or as little as you would like to. You can also make these cells a color if you would like to. So if you highlight the cells that you want to make a color, the way to make a color is this little tipped over paint can over here, and it says fill color when you hover over it. So I might decide to make this green. Okay. Remember that when we're working on our spreadsheets, part of the grade does come from the design of it, and you do want to minimize the number of colors you use to 5 colors or less. Okay, so we've got short term. I'm going to highlight long term and make that green as well, just to make it consistent. And you would type in whatever that goal is. If your goal is long, so maybe I wanted to type in saving, let's try this again. Saving up for a down payment on a car. I want to save, let's say the down payment is $1,200. Okay. Now, when I entered that, I've got all of this text over here that's not in the green anymore. So I have 2 ways that I can deal with that. I can click on this cell over here that I've got it in. I can do what's called wrapping text. That's right here, text wrapping. The arrow kind of tells you how the text is going to behave on the edge of the cell. So right now, the edge of the cell, it says it goes past it, but I can have it kind of bounce back from that edge as well. So that would be one way of dealing with this. I could also take a bunch of cells and do what's called merging them. That's right here. So I could merge those cells instead, and then it becomes one big cell. That's part of what I used to set up the template in our first project. Okay, so that's some design stuff. Let's get to the tables. We are going to be talking about saving up in terms of months because this is based on what we could budget for savings. And then we might have total savings as the result. Now for your short-term goal, we are saving up just the same amount each month and we are not earning interest. So to get the months in there a little bit easier, I want to put in a few numbers for the beginning of my pattern. I'm going up by 1 month at a time. I could then select that. Remember that selecting goes from clicking the center of a cell and dragging. And then I want to copy that. Copying means clicking from the corner of the cell and dragging. And that copy is a pattern of going up by a certain number of values. Okay. Now we also talked in class about using cell references to set up the actual savings over here. Okay. For your linear savings, you just need to know what you're saving each month. You might call that savings each month, or you might call it something else. Again, we can use, why isn't text wrapping showing up? Oh, that's merging, sorry. Text wrapping, there we go. We can use text wrapping to get that all in one place. So let's say I'm saving up, oh, I don't know, $42. We're going to assume all of this is dollars. You don't have to use that symbol, although you could. You could especially use the $ up here to change the number format. So all of these change the format of the number, but this would be changing it to money if you wanted to. Okay, but you don't have to. You could just leave it as a number as well. And we could, well, now it has 2 decimal places. That's okay. I'm going to make that money again. And we can do the same thing with our total savings. So you can either start at $0 or you can start at some additional amount of money. So maybe you get your tax refund and that's $120 or something like that. Okay, and again, you could turn that into money if you would like to. If we're saving $42 each month, what I'm going to do in my first month here is I'm going to put an equal sign, choose the previous month using the cell reference, and then add on the amount I save each month using this over here. Okay. Now, when I press enter, there I've got my extra $42, that works. But if I try and drag this, there's a problem. And here's the problem. So if I double click on this cell here, I'm actually grabbing this as my savings each month, which is not what I want. I want 42. There's a way to fix that. I can lock this cell to be chosen for every single iteration of the formula. And I do that by putting in a $sign in front of the column that cell is in and in front of the row that cell is in. So there's that. And now when I drag it down, it's going up by 42 each month. Okay. Long-term goal, we are going to be doing an exponential long-term goal. So there are two things we need for our long-term goal. We need an interest rate. This is going to be a monthly interest rate, so we can make that from a yearly one in a cell, or we can just start with a yearly, or start with a monthly interest rate. It's entirely up to you. We do want to make sure that this monthly interest rate adds in the 1 for keeping the previous 100%. Plus 1. Okay. And I'm going to wrap that. Okay. So we need the interest rate. Let's say I have a 4.5% interest rate. Now that was a percent. Okay. So let me type that over here. You don't have to type this on the side. Not 45, 4.5%. Okay, so let's say this is my percent right here. And I can leave it in percent form. But what I want to do is then change that to a monthly percent. So I would take my yearly percent and I would divide by 12. That would give me my monthly percent. Now notice with the percent symbol, it figured out that what the decimal should be. So if I made this instead if I just made this 4.5 again, you'll see, so this was in percent form, and this one is also in percent form over here. But I could change this into decimal form by dividing it by 100. So if I take equals 4.5 and I divide that by 100, now that's in decimal form and it's actually not giving me enough decimal places. It's weird the way the formatting changes. Now that these are in decimal form, I can think about it that way. I can do it over here. If I just choose 4.5 as my percent for the year, I can divide by 12, then divide by 100. And that's going to give me that amount here. But I do need to add in 1 so that I can actually use it in my table. We'll talk about that in just a second. So I would add on 1 at the end to that as well. That's going to give me my interest rate. And then I need a monthly savings amount, so savings each month. Now I can make this bigger as well. Okay, and let's go with the same, $42. And actually, take it 42. Okay, there we go. Put in my months. Select, copy. Total savings, let's start 0 for this one. You don't have to. Equals my previous value times my interest rate, which I want to lock because I don't want that to change. And then plus my monthly savings, which again I want to lock because I don't want my monthly savings to change. Then I would take this and I would drag it down. Okay. And then that is our long-term savings. The nice thing about this is you can actually change the the interest rate plus 1 as much as you want. So maybe it's 8% annual interest, which would be 0.6%. So we would have 1.00667 or something like that. And it automatically updates these numbers over here. Likewise, maybe I really have $420 to save each month. That updates these over here as well. So the nice thing about using the cell references is that you can actually change the values really quickly without having to drag that down every single time you want to do an update. It's especially useful because you should have some amount in mind, like here for my wanting to save up $1,200 for the car. I should have some amount in mind that I want to save up, and I should be able to figure out when I would have saved that up. So if I copy the bottom of this pattern and drag it down a ways more and do the same thing here. So I'm almost at 1,200, so let's drag this down a little bit further. Okay, so at 26 months I would have saved up $1,200. I would have saved up that down payment. That's 2 years. Maybe that's too long to wait to save up your payment. So you could change the amount that you save each month. Say you want to change it to $65 instead. Now you're going to be getting your amount saved up in 17 months instead, and maybe that's more reasonable for you. So that's what you're trying to do here. You're trying to put together a savings plan that makes sense for what you're saving up for. On top of that, I'd like you to put together a graph for each of these. To put together a graph, we are selecting all of our data. So I'm going to select all of our data here, all the way down to the bottom. And then we're going to go to Insert, Chart. You'll notice this icon right here is the same as over here. You could also just click this Insert Chart button over here. Either one will work. This is not the kind of graph we want. We want what's called a scatter plot. So we'll scroll down here to scatter plot. That's a nice linear pattern. You can change a lot of the things about the graph here. We'll go to customization to do that. A title would be helpful. Okay, so we might call that saving up for a down payment on a car. Okay, that's updated my title. You can change it to make it italicized. You can take off the boldface type. You can change the size. I'm not sure why you would want it that big, but you could do that. You can also change the color. Okay, so we have a lot of different ways in which we could actually change the graph here. There's a legend over here. You don't have to leave that in since we're going to label the axes. You could take that out if you want to, or you can leave it in there. It's entirely up to you. So I might change that to none. Okay. If you did have it in there at the right, you can also change it, make it bold, make it italicized, change the font size. If you make it too big, it doesn't show up anymore. I think it was 12. Yep, and you can change the color as well. Okay, so you can make everything blue if you want to. You can also change the font. The font will change for the entire graph when you do that. So if I make it Comic Sans, the whole graph, everything in here is now Comic Sans. And I can also change the background of the whole graph. So maybe I like some nice contrasting colors, so I've chosen some yellow. I'll choose a lighter. That is not a good yellow. Maybe dark yellow. That's a bit excessive. Not very good to look at, but let's just stick with that because you get the idea. The horizontal axis, you'll want to make sure you title that. You can toggle between the two axes by clicking this little drop-down menu. So let's title this. That is the time, and we're measuring time in months. Okay. And you can also change the color of the title. You can change the label for the title. We could just make everything blue, and that would be fine. I was asked in class about changing where the what's called grid lines are. So how far you go out here. You can change where the minimum and maximum values are. So whether you start at 0, whether you end at 30. I might start at 0 and maybe I would go to something that's a number of years. So maybe I'd go out to 24 just to get 2 years worth or something. This gave me slightly more reasonable values along the bottom, but maybe I want to go up by a different number of years. That would be changing the number of grid lines. So right now it says the number of major grid lines is 5. That is meaning how many of these vertical lines there are, how many lines come down and attach to this horizontal axis. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I want to add in extra numbers here, I need more grid lines. So I might go up to 10. That's giving me some strange values here. So maybe I would go to just 8. That's major grid lines. I can also put in what are called minor grid lines here. So my minor grid lines, I could put some in between. That again, the more I have, the more lines there will be, right? So there's my 3 minor grid lines. And I can change the color of these as well. Maybe something like that. Go back up, change to the vertical axis, call this total savings, and it's clearly measured in dollars here, but we'll put in a dollar sign as well. We'll change our fonts to blue to be consistent, and the minimum and maximum I think are okay here, but maybe we want to put in, say, 5 grid lines, because then it's going up by 100 at a time, and I would change my grid line colors. I think that that's right, something like that. That's kind of hard to read. You may not want to put in a background color, or maybe not as strong of a background color as I've chosen here. But you get the idea, hopefully, of how we can change this graph to make it more personalized. If you scroll down, there's not a whole lot else until you get down here to series. That's the dots that you have. It's total savings. You can change the color of those to make them blue, or to make them green or blue, or whatever makes sense for you. You can change what symbol you use, so I could make them all stars if I want to, or I can make them X's if I want to, or you can see what we have here. I'll leave mine as stars. And you can label each of these with a value. That gets quite overwhelming, so we won't do that. And then you can put in a line underneath, linear, like a trend line, so that it matches. And they always choose a trend line color that matches with the color of the dots that you chose. So if I go through and change this to a yellow line, or yellow stars, it also changes my trend line to yellow. And that's about it. Your label can be an equation instead, if you would like, for the line. It doesn't really need to be labeled if you don't want it to, so you could change that to none. But that's about it for that line there. We'll go ahead and insert it. And then you're going to want to drag it to a more useful place. I'm going to drag it there, and then I'm actually going to resize it to be a little bit smaller. Mostly just to put the graph of the exponential one in here as well. So exponential, select, insert graph, scroll down to scatter plot. Pretty much everything's the same with customization, except that if you put in a trend line down at the bottom, there it is, you're actually choosing exponential because it is an exponential graph. That is not what we want. Well, that's an interesting question that I don't know that I have an answer to right now. So maybe we should not put in a trend line into this exponential graph for now, until I figured out why that's doing what it's doing and how to fix it. You do not have to have a trend line in there, it's just if you wanted to have it. So if you don't have one for this savings plan, that's totally fine. I think that about covers everything. So if you have questions, go ahead and send me an email. Again, this is due Tuesday the 28th. And yeah, that's about it.